All right. So really quickly getting into Waycrest here, just kind of some general tips, some of which will be, fully general amongst various classes, and some will be kind of specifically for Warlock, and one of which will actually be somewhat race specific. So, a couple of quick tips on Rahl, one of which is going to be Warlock specific. Rahl is a very straightforward fight. He will cast this Rotten Expulsion, which is actually one of the abilities that I find people get hit by much more often than they need to. When this ability does target somebody, so I'm not currently targeting the boss, so you can't see who he was targeting, but he does swap targets as well on the frame. But also you can get a weak aura that does show the target of any spell on the actual nameplate itself, which is what I had there. So it was targeting me. It would target a random person in your group. If I'm not mistaken, it cannot target the tank, but it can target melee DPS. And it does this, where it spawns the oozlings and puts these kind of puddles out there. Technically, this is not aimed directly at you in the sense of it will not always drop a puddle directly under you, and does not do damage directly to you. It kind of just spits the puddles in your general direction. So, worthwhile to know who this is targeting, because if it is targeting you or someone that you're standing near, you can dodge left or right and completely ensure that you will not be hit by the puddles. Those puddles do quite a bit of damage, especially on Tyrannical, so worth it to avoid those as best you can. This one, very important. Tenderize. You'll also see people, especially some newer people or possibly some people that are less familiar with these mechanics or just kind of struggle with them, get hit by this ability a lot. This ability is very easy to dodge. You'll just target a random person in your group, do a big frontal cone at them, don't be in the cone. Not a great indicator, but typically what you'll see is people just kind of run left to right, back and forth. Why I have this Warlock circle bound, this demonic circle bound rather, is for this reason right here. Is as with having that Warlock circle bound, with having the demonic circle bound, it's very easy to bait a tenderize away from your group. Because you can safely port back to them. That can save quite a bit of uptime, especially if you have a lot of casters in the group. I won't say it's like super worth it to do it, but it's easy not to lose uptime personally and gain uptime for the rest of your group. Just portal over. Nice and good. Quick bit of information here on these servants. Just basic boss guide sort of information here. These do need to die. They don't heal the boss when they get to him, but what they do is when the boss eats one of the servants, it puts a nasty dot on everyone in the party. So they do have to die before they reach the boss. These can be knocked. I actually show off here. They can be mortal coiled. Any horrify or fear effect that causes the target to run away, they are vulnerable to. Worth noting. So like psychic scream and stuff like that also works. Bad part about this is the direction they flee in is totally random, uncontrollable. So they might just run straight towards the boss, and they move a lot faster when they're feared. So this is what I would call kind of like more of a last-ditch effort. If for some reason like one of your DPS is dead and they're just dying too slow, you can coil or fear one of the mobs away, give yourself potentially a little bit more time to kill it. It also won't offer itself while it is being feared, so if you only have one target left, this is a potential option for dealing with it. So moving on here, these mobs, these Thorn Shaper mobs, you want to just kind of touch on them very briefly here for just a moment. Their cast is one of the easiest ways to die on a fortified week, I would say, in this dungeon. Infected Thorn does an absurd amount of damage. If one cast gets off, you have to defensive it. Anyone that goes on has to defensive. If you don't, you are very likely to die. They can be Curse of Tongues. That's where I'm going with this, is that they can be afflicted with Curse of Tongues, greatly reducing the speed at which they cast that ability, and they do basically just cast it on repeat. So very worth it to cast Curse of Tongues on them if you're concerned about the kicks in your group or the knocks in your group or whatever. So also to speak on these Jagged Hounds, these do trigger affixes. They are one of if I'm not mistaken, they are the only non-elite mob that I'm aware of. That's actually not true. They are the only extremely low health non-elite mob in the current dungeon rotation that triggers sanguine, bolstering, and bursting. So pulling a large section of these, especially the ones that kind of run around the fountain, can be very, very dangerous, especially when pulled with a Thorn Shaper or pulled with Matron, something to that effect. Very, very, very dangerous. So worthwhile to note that. So I had mentioned earlier that there is kind of one piece of advice that I did have planned for this video that is race specific. That is actually on this boss here. I'm actually going to intentionally let this Soulthorn cast go off to show off that this Soulthorn cast can be removed. There's a few things that remove it. I actually tested here to make sure that the Demonic Circle couldn't do it. It doesn't. It is a stun. But Human Racial does. There's a few things that work here. Human Racial, just a few things I'm aware of. Human Racial, Bubble, Divine Shield specifically, not Bop, but Divine Shield. Blink, not Shimmer, but Blink will remove it as well. But nothing that somebody can cast on you, as far as I'm aware, will remove it. So Human Racial is very, very powerful here. PvP Trinket is very, very powerful here. Typically, you really only need one of those unless you're playing with Og. Og is in a really questionable spot for this boss because, of course, the alternative to trinketing or Human Racial or whatever is to actually kill the Thorn. And of course, Ogs are not very good at killing stuff single-handedly. So kind of a very questionable situation if you are playing with an Og. You may want to run like a PvP Trinket, or maybe you're playing like Og Ret Paladin or Og Prop Paladin, where they can also bop you, which will prevent the damage that the Thorn would do to you for the duration of bop. It won't remove the Thorn itself, but will prevent that damage. So some other alternative ways of dealing with that. If you don't have Human Racial, don't have a way to remove it, I would always recommend single defensing those, using one single defensive. A quick note, I don't believe I actually targeted one of these captains. These captains cast Spirited Defense, which is a cast, can be interrupted. Not unusual for it to get missed. We can pick a target and use Devour Magic with our Fellhound as a Destro or Affliction Warlock. Unfortunately, as Demonology, Belgard does not have something akin to this, but we can, like I said, as Demo or as Destro or Affliction. So you can remove it from a single target. So worth noting that that is a possibility. Something I would highly, highly recommend is keeping up Cursed Tongues on this boss, on all three of them at the same time. And something that I typically recommend to the people that I run keys with, and would recommend to anyone looking to run this key, especially at a high level, unless absolutely necessary, I would not kick the active boss at any point. The one that currently has the iris, the largest of the three bosses, I would not kick. That one will always cast specifically at your tank. Your tank can very easily survive these, especially any tank that's good at handling magic damage. BDHs are pretty good. Warriors, in this case, specifically because they are single target spells, they can spell block and they can spell reflect, so they are also fairly good at taking care of this. Really, any tank should be able to fairly easily live this. Protection Paladin's also fantastic with magic damage, in this case because they do have the ability to naturally block spells. So I would highly recommend specifically focusing your interrupts on the off bosses. So unfortunately, that does require you to swap targets to something you don't really want to hit in order to interrupt it, but you can save a lot of HP by doing that. So not just for yourself, but for your party, which does net gain you damage, does let your healer do more damage, does let you do more damage by extension just because the fight is shorter. So moving on very briefly to Briar. This is the one that is most important to speak about. The first boss is fairly straightforward. In here, Selena, she mind controls the target, and you just have to hit the mind control target to get de-mind controlled. no big deal. Second sister in the bunch does require you to move with the Dread Aura. Nothing really super fancy we are able to do about that. Briar, on the other hand, does have some interesting things that we are able to do if we get targeted by the Jagged Nettles. So, Jagged Nettles, effectively what it does is a big burst of damage and then a dot afterwards that is not removed until after we reach full HP. The easiest way to deal with that is by using personal defensives. The unfortunate part about our personal defensives are outside of Unending Resolve, we have Dark Pact. Dark Pact consumes 20% of our HP, give us a very large shield. That's normally super, super good. And in this case, it even is still very, very good. But because it's consuming 20% of our HP, we are no longer at 100% HP, which means that the Jagged Nettles actually remains on us. So some alternatives to that are allow the Jagged Nettles to land, either just fully natural, no defensive, and then immediately Healthstone Coil afterwards, which will typically heal you up fairly close to full HP. Or you can Dark Pact and then Coil before the Nettles lands. And that will put you up to full HP, assuming you're full HP beforehand. Another option, typically what I personally do, is Dark Pact, and then Soul Burn, and then Healthstone. Soul Burn Healthstone does give you a massive heal. If I'm not mistaken, it's 60% of your max HP, and then also gives you 20% more max HP after doing that. So effectively the last stand as well. So it should basically 100% of the time completely remove the debuff. Really eases the pressure on your healer for the fight. And I actually fully single target Lord Waycrest here, but this is just to get past the bug. And the bug is because she took too much damage from me. She dropped below a certain health threshold where she couldn't cast Vitality Transfer anymore. So a quick recommendation for this fight, and this is destruction specific, or any class that may gain damage, arguably, by having dots up on a second target that is not taking damage from you at all. Destruction actually is in this situation, especially with the current tier set bonus. Immolate does trigger on it more commonly. The added dimensional rifts do trigger more often if you have it on more targets. So applying an Immolate here, or just Havocing whenever you have Havoc up, and then just fighting Waycrest as normal, does net gain you just a little bit of damage for basically free. I'm gonna go ahead and pull him here. Nothing too fancy with this fight. Worth noting that the Death Touch Slavers here are vulnerable to stuns exclusively. They cannot be feared, they cannot be coiled. That is the big kind of worthwhile note, I would say, for those mobs specifically, because they do need to be stunned. They do need to be knocked in some way, more accurately. Otherwise, they do stun one of your party members. And just kind of general advice for this fight is very straightforward. But something that I have seen kind of in lower keys is people are a little bit less familiar with this dungeon. Of course, this is a BFA dungeon, so we haven't run it on a normal or heroic difficulty in quite a while. This dungeon specifically, this boss will put out small little alchemical fires, I believe is what they're called. They kind of just have, there's a little vial within like a golden or yellow colored circle. If you run over them, it gives you an extra action button, just kind of in the middle of your screen or wherever you have that positioned on your screen. And what that does is if you click on that, or if you use your extra action button, whatever you have that bound to, it does give you a targeting indicator on the ground. So you can just throw the fire, and you do want to throw the fire on the corpses of the Death Touch Slavers, because whenever this boss this boss can either res existing corpses of Death Touch Slavers or heal them to full. And that's, see if I can get the reviewing the fight here real quick. See if I can get the full name. I'm going to have to cut this out of the video, unfortunately. Get the name of the ability here. Dread Essence. So it is when the boss reaches 100% energy, you cast Dread Essence. Excuse me. The name of that ability is Dread Essence. When the boss casts Dread Essence, it will either fully heal any existing Death Touch slavers or revive at full HP any of the corpses that are currently still on the ground. So those alchemical fires are very important. Typically, most healers will do that, but if you happen to be in a group where the healer is not familiar with that, or they're just not doing it for whatever reason, potentially they just are trying to do damage, or maybe they're trying to struggling to keep up in healing, whatever the case may be. Maybe the death lens gets off. If it becomes your responsibility to do that, that is how you would do that mechanic. Is run over the small yellow circle that has the vial in it, gives you that extra action button, click the button, use the targeting indicator to throw it on the corpse. So that's just kind of some general information about Waycrest, both some kind of general boss information that I've seen some difficulties with in my journeys within Keys, as well as kind of some Warlock / race specific options for dealing with certain boss mechanics or dealing with certain mechanics throughout the dungeon. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please absolutely do check out some of the other content available on my channel, or catch me live at twitch.tv/Kadalis. Please follow so that you can receive live notifications for when I am streaming. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the video.